Okay, it is the 11th of May, and I am here with the 11th section of Night Watch by Terry Pratchett. Before I start, I'm just going to say that I have a bit of a cold, so I'm going to sound even funnier than usual. And this first scene in this section, the first time I ever read it, I just fangirled out of my mind. So, in for a treat. I say, who's the skirt up there with old Folly? The prefects looked up. On the raised platform, at the end of the noisy dining hall, Dr. Follett, Master of Assassins, and ex officio headmaster of the Assassins' Guild School, was in an animated conversation with, indeed, a lady. The vivid purple of her dress made a splash of colour in the vast room where black predominated, and the elegant whiteness of his hair shone like a beacon in the darkness. It was a guild of assassins, after all. Black was what you wore. The night was black, and so were you. And black had such style, and an assassin without style, everyone agreed, was just a highly paid, arrogant thug. The prefects were all over 18, and therefore allowed to visit parts of the city that the younger boys weren't even supposed to know about. Their pimples no longer erupted at the sight of a woman. Now their eyes narrowed. Most of them had already learned that the world was an oyster that could be opened with gold if a blade did not suffice. "Probably a parent," said one of them. "I wonder who's the lucky boy?" "I know who she is," said Ludo Ludorum, head of the Viper House. "I heard some of the masters talking earlier. She's Madame Roberta Meserole, bought the old house on Easy Street. They say she made a pile of money in Genua, and wants to settle down here. Looking for investment opportunities, apparently." "Madam," said Downey, "an honorific or a job description." "In Genua? Could be both," said someone, to general laughter. "Folly's certainly plying her with champagne," said Downey. "They're on their third bottle. What have they got to talk about?" "Politics," said Ludo. "Everyone knows Winder isn't going to do the decent thing, so it'll be down to us. And Folly is annoyed because we've lost 3 chaps up there already. Winder's pretty cunning. There's guards and soldiers everywhere you look." "Winder's a skag," said Downey. "Yes, Downey, you call everyone a skag," said Ludo calmly. "Well, everyone is." Downey turned back to the table, and a movement, or rather a lack of movement, caught his eye. Toward the far end of the table one young assassin was sitting reading, with a book stand positioned in front of his plate. He was intent on it, and an empty fork halfway to his mouth. With a wink at the others, Downey selected an apple from the bowl in front of him, stealthily drew his arm back, and let fly with malicious accuracy. The fork moved like a snake's tongue, and skewered the apple out of the air. The reader turned a page. Then, eyes never leaving the print, he delicately brought the fork up to his mouth, and took a bite out of the apple. The rest of the table looked back at Downey, and there were 1 or 2 chuckles. The young man's brow furrowed. Assault having failed, he was forced to try scathing wit, which he did not have. "You really are a skag, dog botherer," he said. "Yes, Downey," said the reader levelly, his eyes still intent on the page. "When are you going to pass some decent exams, dog botherer?" "I really couldn't say, Downey." "Never killed anyone, right, dog botherer?" "Probably not, Downey." The reader turned another page. The little sound infuriated Downey even more. "What's that you're reading?" he snapped. "Robertson, show me what dog bother is reading, will you? Come on, pass it up." The boy next to the one currently known as Dog Botherer snatched the book off the stand and threw it along the length of the table. The reader sighed and sat back as Downey gave the pages a cursory flick. "Well, look here, you fellows," he said. "Dog Botherer is reading a picture book." He held it open. "Colour it in yourself with your paints and crayons, did you, dog botherer?" The former reader stared up at the ceiling. "No, Downy. It was hand-coloured to his instructions by Miss Amelia Jane, the sister of Lord Winstanley Greville Pipe, the author. It says so on the frontispiece, you will note." "And here's a lovely picture of a tiger," Downy ploughed on. "Why are you looking at pictures, dog botherer?" "Because Lord Winstanley had some interesting theories on the art of concealment, Downy," said the reader. "Huh? Black and orange tiger in green trees," said Downy, turning the pages roughly. "Big red ape in green forest. Black and white zebra on yellow grass. What's this? A manual on how not to do it?" Again there was a round of chuckles, but they were forced. Downy had friends because he was big and rich, but sometimes he was embarrassing to have around. As a matter of fact, Lord Winstanley also has interesting point to make about the dangers of intuitive— "This a guild book, dog botherer?" Downy demanded. "No, Downy. It was privately engraved some years ago, and I succeeded in tracking down a copy in—" Downy's hand shot out. The book whirled away, causing a tableful of younger boys to scatter, and landed at the back of the fireplace. The diners at the top table looked around, and then turned back in indifference. Flames licked up. For a moment the tiger burned brightly. "Rare book, was it?" said Downy, grinning. "I think it may now be said to be non-existent," said the one known as Dog Botherer. "That was the only extant copy. Even the engraved plates have been melted down." "Don't you ever get upset, Dog Botherer?" "Oh, yes, Downy," said the reader. He pushed his chair back and stood up. "And now I believe I will have an early night." He nodded at the table. "Good evening, Downy. Gentlemen." "You're a skag, veterinary." "Just as you say, Downy." "It was veterinary!" I love it. Vimes thought better when his feet were moving. The mere activity calmed him down and shook his thoughts into order. Apart from the curfew and manning the gates, the night watch didn't do a lot. This was partly because they were incompetent, and partly because no one expected them to be anything else. They walked the streets slowly, giving anyone dangerous enough time to saunter away or melt into the shadows, and then rang the bell to announce to a sleeping world, or at any rate a world that had been asleep, the fact that all was, despite appearances, well. They also rounded up the quieter sort of drunk and the more docile kinds of stray cattle. "They think I'm a spy for Winder," thought Vimes. "Spying on the Treacle Mine Road watch? It's like spying on dough." Vimes had flatly refused to carry a bell. Young Sam had acquired a lighter one, but out of deference to Vimes's crisply expressed wishes, kept the clapper muffled with a duster. "Is the wagon going out tonight, Sarge?" said young Sam, as the twilight faded toward night. "Yes, Colin and Waddy are on it." "Taking people to Cable Street?" "No," said Vimes. "I told 'em to take everyone to the watch house, and Snouty'll fine 'em $50 and take their name and address. Perhaps we'll have a raffle." "We'll get into trouble, Sarge." "The curfew's just to frighten people. It doesn't mean much." "Our mum says there's going to be trouble soon," said Sam. "She heard it in the fish shop. Everyone says it's going to be Snapcase at the palace. He listens to the people." "Yeah, right," said Vimes. "And I listen to the thunder, but I don't do anything about it." "Our mum says everyone will have a voice in the city when Snapcase is the patrician," Sam went on. "Keep the voice down, kid." "The day'll come when the angry masses will rise up and throw off their shekels, the fishmonger says," said Sam. If I was a spy for Swing, that fishmonger would be gutted, Vimes thought. Quite the revolutionary, our man. He wondered if it was at all possible to give this idiot some lessons in basic politics. That was always the dream, wasn't it? I wish I knew then what I know now. But when you got older, you found out that you now wasn't you then. You then was a twerp. You then was what you had to be to start out on the rocky road of becoming you now, and one of the rocky patches on that road was being a twerp. A much better dream, one that'd ensure sounder sleep, was not to know now what you didn't know then. "What's your dad do?" he said, as if he didn't know. "He passed away a long time ago, Sarge," said Sam, "when I was little. Run down by a cart when he was crossing the street, our mum said." What a champion liar she was too. "Sorry to hear that," said Vimes. Our mum says you're welcome round to tea one night, what with you being all by yourself in a strange city, Sarge." "Would you like me to give you another tip, lad?" said Vimes. "Yes, sir, Sarge, I'm learning a lot." Lance constables do not invite their sergeants round to tea. Don't ask me why, it's one of those things that does not happen. "You don't know our mum, Sarge." Vimes coughed. "Mums are mums, Lance Constable. They don't like to see men managing by themselves, in case that sort of thing catches on. Besides, I know she's been up in Small Gods these past 10 years. I'd rather put one hand flat on the table and give Swing the hammer than walk down Cockbill Street today." "Well," said Sam, she says she's going to make you some distressed pudding, Sarge. She makes great distressed pudding, our mum." The best, thought Vimes, staring into the middle distance. Oh, gods, the very best. No one has ever done it better. "That'd be very kind of her," he managed. "Sarge," said Sam after a while, "why are we patrolling Morphic Street? That's not our beat." "I switched beats. I ought to see as much of the city as possible," said Vimes. "Not a lot to see in Morphic Street, Sarge." Vimes looked at the shadows. "Oh, I don't know," he said. "It's amazing what you see if you concentrate." He pulled Sam into a doorway. "Just whisper, lad," he said. "Now, look down there at the house opposite. See that doorway with the deeper shadow?" "Yes, Sarge," whispered Sam. "Why is it such a deep shadow, do you think?" "Dunno, Sarge." "'Cause someone in black is standing in it, that's why. So we're going to walk a little further, and then we'll just turn around and go back around the corner. We're heading back to the station like good boys because our coke is getting cold, see?" "Right, Sarge." They ambled back around the corner, and Vimes let them walk sufficiently far up the street that the footsteps died away naturally. "Okay, this is far enough," he said. Give Sam his due, Vimes thought. He knew how to stand still. He'd have to teach him, too, how to unfocus himself, so that he could very nearly fade out of sight on a cloudy day. Had Keel taught him that? After a certain age, memory was indeed an untrustworthy thing. The city's clocks chimed the 3/4 hour. "What time's curfew?" Vimes whispered. 9 o'clock, Sarge." "Must be nearly that now," said Vimes. "No, it's just gone 9:15, Sarge." "Well, it's going to take me a few minutes to get back. I want you to sneak back after me and wait at the corner. When it starts, you come running and banging that bell of yours." "When what starts, Sarge? Sarge?" But Vimes was walking noiselessly down the road. He made a mental note to slip Snouty $1. These boots felt like foot gloves. Torches spluttered at the junction, destroying the night vision of anyone who looked in that direction. Vimes padded around the dark penumbra and sidled along the buildings on the far wall until he was level with the door. Then he swung around the frame and shouted, "You're nicked, chum!" said the shadow. "And that's offensive language, sir, such as I would not wish my young Lance Constable to hear." Behind him he heard Lance Constable Vimes advancing at a run, ringing his bell madly and shouting, "9 o'clock and all's not well at all!" And there were other sounds too, the ones Vimes had been half listening for, of doors slamming and distant footsteps hurrying away. "You bloody fool!" said the struggling figure in black. "What the hell are you playing at?" He pushed at Vimes, who nevertheless tightened his grip. "That, sir, is assault upon a watch officer," said Vimes. "I'm a watch officer too, you damned flatfoot, from Cable Street." "Where's your uniform?" "We don't wear uniforms." "Where's your badge?" and we don't carry badges." "Hard to see why I shouldn't think you as a common thief then, sir. You was casing that joint over there," said Vimes, happy in the role of big, thick, but horribly unshakable copper. "We seen you." "There was going to be a meeting of dangerous anarchists." "What kind of religion is that, sir?" Vimes patted the man's belt. "Oh dear, what have we here? A very nasty dagger. See this, Lance Constable Vimes? A weapon, no doubt about it. That's against the law. Carried after dark, which is even more against the law. And it's a concealed weapon." "What do you mean, concealed?" screamed the twisting prisoner. "It was in a bloody sheath." "Bloody, eh? Used it already, have you, sir?" said Vimes. He thrust a hand into a pocket of the man's black coat, and what's this? A little black velvet roll with, I do believe, a complete set of lockpicks. That's going equipped for burglary, that is. "They're not mine, and you know it," the man snarled. "Are you sure, sir?" said Vimes. "Yes, because I keep mine in my inside pocket, you bastard." "That's using language liable to cause a breach of the peace," said Vimes. "Huh? You idiots have scared everyone away. Who's going to be offended?" "Well, I might. I'm sure you don't want that, sir." "You're that stupid sergeant we've been told about, aren't you?" growled the man. "Too thick to see what's going on, right? Well, this is where you find out, mister." He twisted out of Vimes's grip, and there were a couple of sliding metallic noises in the gloom. Wrist knives, thought Vimes. Even assassins think they're an idiot's weapon. He took a couple of steps back as the man danced towards him, both knives waving. "Can't think of a dumb answer to this one, eh, brown job?" To his horror, Vimes saw, behind the man, the shape of Sam raising his bell very slowly. "Don't hit him!" he shouted, and then lashed out with his boot as the man's head turned. "If you're going to fight, fight," he said, as the man toppled forward. "If you're going to talk, talk. Don't try to talk and fight. And right now, I caution you to do neither." "I could have had him easily, Sarge," Sam complained, as Vimes fished out his handcuffs and knelt down. "I could have blown him out like a light." "Head injuries can be fatal, Lance Constable. We serve the public trust." "But you kicked him in the private, Sarge." "Because I don't want you to be a target," thought Vimes, as he tightened the cuffs. "That means you don't belt one of them over the head. You stay as the dim sidekick, in the background. That way you survive, and that way, maybe, I do too. You don't have to fight the way the other bloke wants you to fight," he said, hefting the man onto his shoulders. "Give me a hand here. Up we go. Okay, I've got him. You lead the way." "Back to the watch-house?" said Sam. "You're arresting an unmentionable?" "Yes, I just hope we'll meet some of our lads on the way. Let this be a lesson, lad. There aren't any rules. Not when there's knives out. You take him down, quietly if possible, without hurting him much, if possible, but you take him down. He comes at you with a knife, you bring your stick down on his arm. He comes at you with his hands, you use your knee, or your boot, or your helmet. Your job is to keep the peace. You make it peaceful as quickly as you can." "Yes, sir, but there's going to be trouble, Sarge." "Straightforward arrest. Even coppers have to obey the law, what there is of it." "Yes, Sarge, but I mean there's going to be trouble right now, Sarge." They'd reached the end of the road, and there was a group of figures there. They looked like men with a purpose. There was something about the stance, the way they were standing in the road, and of course the occasional glint of light on a weapon also gave a hint. There was a snapping of little doors as dark lanterns were opened. Of course, he wouldn't have been alone, Vimes scolded himself. His job was just to watch until they'd all gone in, and then he'd just schlep away and call in the heavy gang. There must be a dozen of them. We're going to get cheesed. Footnote. Like creamed, but it goes on for longer. "What'll we do, Sarge?" whispered Sam. "Ring your bell." "But they've spotted us." "Ring the bell. Ring the damn bell, will you? And keep walking, and don't stop ringing." The unmentionables spread out now, and as Vimes trudged towards them, he saw several figures at each end of the line slip around behind him. That's how it'd go. They'd be like the muggers up in Scoon Avenue, talking nice and friendly while their eyes said, "Hey, you know our mates are right behind you, and we know you know, and it's fun watching you trying to pretend that this is just a civilized conversation, when you know that any minute you're going to get it right in the kidneys. We feel your pain, and we like it." He stopped walking. It was that or walk into someone. And all along the street doors and windows were opening as the clanging of the bell roused the neighbourhood. "Evening," he said. "Evening, your Grace," said a voice out of history. "Nice to see an old friend, eh?" Vimes groaned. The worst that could happen had happened. "Carcer. That's Sergeant Carcer, thank you. Funny how things work out, eh? Turns out I'm prime copper material, ha ha. They gave me a new suit and a sword and $25 a month, just like that. Lads, this is the man I told you about." "Why'd you call him your Grace, Sarge?" said one of the shadowy men. Carcer's eyes never left Vimes's face. "It's a joke. Where we come from, everyone used to call him Duke," said Carcer. Vimes saw him slip a hand into a pocket. It came out holding something that had a brassy glint. "It was a sort of nickname, eh? Duke? Stop that kid ringing the damn bell, would you?" "Knock it off, Lance Constable," Vimes muttered. The noise had worked, anyway. This little tableau had a silent audience now. Not that an audience would make any difference to Carcer. He'd cheerfully stab you to death in the centre of a crowded arena, and then look around and say, "Who, me?" But the men behind him were edgy, like cockroaches wondering when the light was going to go on. "Don't you worry, Duke," Carcer said, sliding his fingers into the brass knuckles. "I've told the boys all about you and me, how we, ha-ha, go back a long way and all that, ha-ha." "Yeah," said Vimes. It wasn't prize-winning repartee, but Carcer obviously wanted to talk. "And how did you get made a sergeant, Carcer?" "I heard where they were looking for coppers with fresh ideas," said Carcer, "and that nice Captain Swing hisself talked to me and said he was in no doubt I was an honest man who had been unlucky. Measured me up, he did, with his calipers and his rulers and his geometry, and he said it proved I was not a criminal type. It was all the fault of my environment, he said." "What, you mean all those dead bodies everywhere you went?" said Vimes. "Nice one, Duke, ha-ha. And you had fresh ideas, did you?" "Well, he liked one of them," said Carcer, narrowing his eyes. "Turned out he didn't know the ginger beer trick." The ginger beer trick. Well, that just about put the tin lid on it. Torturers down the ages hadn't found the ginger beer trick, and Carcer had handed it over to a patient maniac like Captain Swing. "The ginger beer trick," said Vimes. "Well done, Carcer. You're just what Swing's been looking for. The complete bastard." Carcer grinned as if he'd been awarded a small prize. "Yeah, I already told him how you got a down on me for stealing a loaf of bread." "Come on, Carcer," said Vimes. "That's not you. You never pinched a loaf of bread in your life. Murdering the baker and stealing the bakery, that'd be your style." "He's a card, eh?" said Carcer, winking at his men and nodding toward Vimes. Then, in one movement, he spun around and punched the man beside him in the stomach. "You don't call me Sarge," he hissed. "It's Sergeant, understand?" On the floor, the man groaned. "I'll take that as a yes, then, ha-ha," said Carcer, slipping his brass knuckles back into his pocket. "Now, the thing is, Duke, what you have there is one of my men, so how about you hand him over and we'll say no more about it?" "What's happening, Sarge?" The voice was coming from some way behind Vimes. He turned. It was Wiglet and Scuts. They looked like men who'd been running, but now were trying to affect a nonchalant swagger. It was getting less nonchalant and considerably less swaggy as they eyed up the unmentionables. The frantically ringing bell. That's what they'd always used. All the coppers who heard it would converge on it, because an officer was in trouble. Of course, they wouldn't necessarily help him out of trouble, not if the odds weren't right. This was the old night watch, after all. But at least they could fish him out of the river or cut him down and see he got a decent burial. There was a rumble from further up the street, and the rattling bulk of the hurry-up turned the corner, with Fred Colin at the reins and Constable Waddy hanging on the back. Vimes heard the shouts. "What's up, Bill?" "It's Keel and Vimesy," Wiglet called back. "Hurry up!" Vimes tried to avoid Carser's eyes, tried to appear as if nothing had happened, tried to pretend that the world had not suddenly cracked open and let the cold winds of infinity. But Carser was smart. He glanced at Vimes, looked at Sam. "Vimesy?" he said. "Your name's Sam Vimes, mister?" "I ain't saying anything," said Lance Constable Vimes staunchly. "Well, well, 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 well," said Carser happily. "Now here's a nice how'd you do, eh? Something for a chap to think about, and no mistake, ha-ha." There was a creak as the hurry-up wagon rolled to a stop. Carser glanced up at the round, pale face of Corporal Colin. "You just go about your business, Corporal," said Carser. "You just leave now." Colin swallowed. Vimes could see his Adam's apple bob as it tried to hide. We heard the ringing," he said. "Just a bit of high spirits," said Carser. "Nothing that need worry you. We're all coppers here, right?" Sorry, excuse me. "I wouldn't like for there to be any trouble. There's just been a bit of a misunderstanding, that's all. Sergeant Keel here was just going to hand over my friend there, right, Sergeant? No hard feelings, eh? You just happened to blunder into a little operation of ours. Best not to talk about it. Just you hand him over and we'll call it quits." Every head turned to Vimes. The sensible thing would be to hand the man over. He knew it. And then, probably, Carser would go away, and he didn't want that man any closer to young Sam than he could help. But Carser would come back. Oh yes, things like Carser always came back, especially when they thought they'd found a weakness. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he'd changed things. There had been a Morphic street conspiracy. The unmentionables had raided it. A lot of people had died, but some had got away. And then there had been a few days of horrible confusion, and then it ended when... But Sam Vimes hadn't been anywhere near Morphic Street that night. Keel had been teaching him how to shake hands with doorknobs over the other side of the shades. But you wanted to be clever, Duke. You wanted to put a spoke in the wheel and smack a few heads, didn't you? And now Carser's in it as well, and you're out of the history books and travelling without a map. Carser was still grinning his cheerful grin. Here and now, more than anything else, Vimes wanted to see the end of that grin. "Well, I'd like to oblige, Sarge," he said. "I really would. But I've pinched him now, so I've got to take him back to my Nick and do the paperwork. He might well be able to help us with our inquiries into a number of unsolved crimes." "Such as?" said Carser. "Dunno," said Vimes. "Depends what we've got. We'll take him down to the cells, give him a cup of tea, chat to him about this and that. You know how it is. A man can get quite chatty after a cup of tea. Or carbonated beverage of his choice, of course." There was a snigger from around the members of the watch, although Vimes hoped none of them understood what that last sentence meant. Carser's smile dissolved. "I said he's one of my men, on official business, and I am a sergeant," he said. "And I'm a sergeant-at-arms, and I said we'll hand him over to you at the Nick, Sergeant Carser. Officially." Carser nodded towards the Lance Constable, so imperceptibly that only Vimes saw it, and he lowered his voice. "But suddenly I've got all the aces, Duke," he said. "But suddenly I'm not playing cards, Carser. Now, we could have a Barney right here and now, and you know what? I'm not sure which way it'd go, but I'm sure as hell you wouldn't be a sergeant tomorrow. And if you think you've got all the aces, you can afford to raise the stakes." Carser stared at him for a moment. Then he winked and half turned away. "I told you he's a caution, eh?" he said to the multitude. He gave Vimes a conspiratorial dig in the ribs. "Always trying it on. OK, Sergeant. At arms. We'll do it your way. Got to give you brown jobs something to do, eh? I'll send a couple of the lads down for him in an hour or so." That's right, give me time to sweat on whether I'll pop into non-existence if you cut the lad's throat, Vimes thought. Trouble is, I am sweating. He straightened up and beckoned to the hurry-up wagon. Me and my lads will all take him back, he said. Time for our coca break, see? Give me a hand up with him, Waddy. Got any other passengers, Fred? Just a drunk, Sarge. Been spewing everywhere. Okay, we'll put the prisoner in the back and we'll all hang on the outside. Vimes nodded at Carcer. I'm sure we'll meet again soon, Sergeant. Yeah, said Carcer, and there was that impish grin again. And you be sure to look after yourself, do you hear? Vimes leaped onto the side of the wagon as it rattled past, and didn't even look back. That was one thing about Carcer, at least. He wouldn't shoot you in the back if he thought there was a reasonable chance, pretty soon, of cutting your throat. After a while, Constable Wiglet, hanging on beside him as the wagon rocked, said, What happened back there, Sarge? You know that bloke? Yes, he's killed 2 coppers, one that tried to arrest him and one who was off duty and eating a pie. Killed other people, too. But he's a copper. Swing gave him a job, Wiglet. Suddenly, the rattle of the wheels sounded much louder. All the other watchmen were listening very intently. You been in the watch long, Constable? Said Vimes. 2 years, Sarge, said Wiglet. Used to be a fruit porter down at the market, but I got a bad back and a bad chest, what with all the cold mornings. I never heard about coppers being killed, said Lance Constable Vimes. It wasn't here, kid. It was a long way away. You were there? They were coppers I knew, yes. Again the mood in the cart changed. There was no obvious sound from the watchman, but over the wagon hung the word, Aha! So you came here to track him down? Said Wiglet. Something like that. We heard you came from Pseudopolis, Sarge, said Sam. I've come from lots of places. Wow, said Sam. He killed a copper who was eating a pie? Said Fred Colin from the box. Yep. What a bastard! What kind of pie was it? Witnesses didn't say. Vimes lied. This was old Ankh-Morpork. The dwarves here right now were a tiny minority who kept their heads down. Well, further down than usual. They certainly were no all-night rat pie shops. Wiglet had something on his mind. They're going to come for that bloke you picked up, he said. Want the rest of the night off, Constable, said Vimes. There was some nervous laughter from the rest of the crew. Poor devils, thought Vimes. You joined up because the wages were good and there was no heavy lifting, and suddenly it's going to be difficult. What are you going to charge our man with, Sarge? Said Sam. Attempted assault on a copper. You saw the knives. You did kick him, though. Right, I forgot. We'll do him for resisting arrest, too. There was some more laughter. We who think we're about to die will laugh at anything. What a bunch. I know you well, gentlemen. You're in it for the quiet life and the pension. You don't hurry too much in case the danger is still around when you get there, and the most you ever expected to face was an obstreperous drunk or a particularly difficult cow. Most of you aren't even coppers, not in your head. In the sea of adventure, you're bottom feeders. And now it's war, and you're in the middle. Not on either side. You're the stupid little band of brown jobs. You're beneath contempt. But believe me, boys, you'll rise. And that is it for today. Hope that wasn't too bad. And Anna will see you tomorrow.